What's up, all you lazy, entitled, basement-dwelling millennials, bootstrapping boomers, apathetic Xers, and goddamn Gen Z kids today? Unions are life, and I think you think that they've figured that out from our previous episodes. But today we've got somebody who can speak a little bit more emphatically on the topic and just unity in general. We've got John Russell with us, and you have way more history and story than I realized when we invited you on, which was already pretty entertaining and interesting. So can you just let us know who you are and where you are and how you got here and all that stuff?
All that good stuff. Well, I have no clue. My life's really weird, man. I mean, I feel like it's kind of telling we showed up in the high vis.
Absolutely.
We need a high vis voting coalition, a high vis organizing committee.
I am all for that.
Yeah, we need to do the high vis outreach. I grew up in the Ohio Valley. That's one of those places where people are like, wait a minute, those states border each other. Grew up in a small town, 3,500 people, Wellsville, Ohio, and it's 10 minutes from both West Virginia and Pennsylvania. So,
coal
West
country.
Virginia, yeah. It's southern West Virginia would take, probably take offense to that. We are we definitely have coal up here, but we're really steel pottery manufacturing, and nowadays fracking.
Pottery.
Yeah, back in the day it was a couple industries, but pottery. Actually, there are people. I'm one of them. We're called plate turners because if you see this. Fiesta ware. That comes from right where I grew up. It's one of the last major American-based manufacturers that still is still running. Homer Laughlin China comes out of the Ohio Valley.
Sure.
Oh,
I
nice.
just imagined like 1,000 people all sitting in a line, over like a decade, just pottery. Just doing everything.
Mm-hmm.
That's basically our people.
So how often is Ghost referenced in your life?
Oh, you know what? It's funny you bring that up now because I drop it constantly, but completely independent of the pottery lineage of my hometown. So I feel like that says something about me more than anything else.
Interesting. Pottery, yeah. So anyway, continue.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm long-winded. I'll wrap it up.
No, absolutely. Be long-winded, please.
We got time.
I want to know. I'm genuinely learning like all this stuff. Obviously, we've been mutuals on TikTok and everything for a while, and I love your stuff. And then, funny, independently of that, he sent me the video of. Actually, it was a different friend of mine sent me the video of you going to a Trump rally, which we'll get into later. And I'm like, oh no shit, I sort of know that guy, and whatever, and I'm still learning all of this stuff new about your history and your backstory here. So please be long-winded. I'm as enthralled as I hope our listeners will be.
I friggin' love internet friends. You know what I mean? It's good. It's good stuff. So anyway, I grew up in a little Rust Belt town here. I kind of got the political bug way early on because basically, like NAFTA trade deals, they kind of killed everything in the economy around where I grew up. It was steel manufacturing, and it just bit the dust. It's been bad here for a while. Of course, we had all kinds of social stuff come in after people really lost an opportunity for good jobs. The opioid epidemic hit really hard. I had 55 kids in my graduating class, 250 kids in the high school total. More than a dozen of them have lost their lives to opioids. So that's kind of the flavor of the town where I grew up. And, you got to be careful about getting the political bug because you get too pissed off about something and then it just becomes your life.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Which is what happened for me. So,
it happens to us all at different times and at different stages. It's just a matter of kind of coming back a little bit from that brink, right?
Or managing it productively.
Well, right, yes. That's mostly why we're here today.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if you get angry enough, you end up with a podcast or
You know what? That's so close to home. It hurts a little. But
it's kind of why we're doing
pain.
it. Yeah, absolutely. So obviously that sounds very Ohio. Opioids and Rust Belt dying manufacturing and industry. And so I understand why they'd be near and dear to your heart and close to something that would get you motivated to get involved as you have. But like, so what got you where does the story go from here?
The political bug started because of conditions at home, and then there's a long string of 10 years of political involvement there. I volunteered on a lot of campaigns. I was knocking on doors for Obama in the Rust Belt in 2008. That was really interesting.
Yeah, that sounds interesting.
Yeah, big time. Intern for Sherrod Brown, one of my favorite people in the Senate, Ohio's senior senator. All the way up to, there are rural districts where it's really hard to get candidates to run because they're gerrymandered and you're going to lose.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I ran for one of those. I ran for state rep the year Trump got elected.
Yeah.
Knocked on a shit ton of doors. I can say shit ton, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Fucking, have you heard my content, man?
I figured it'd be cool.
Shit ton.
Shit ton. Just one more for good measure.
Yep.
Ran for state rep in 2016. I got a good name from that. There's a whole thing that we could get into, but it's a long story. I kind of accidentally ran for Congress too. That was 2018.
As one does, just falls onto the ballot and you're like, well,
It happened to me the other year. Actually,
Yeah,
Just like, oh my God. It's one of those things, you get pissed enough and then all of a sudden you're accidentally running for Congress. And then that all kind of led to, now we're getting into recent times. I was the rural outreach director for Elizabeth Warren in the 2020 campaign.
So how did that happen? How did you become the rural outreach director for Elizabeth Warren? Because there's definitely a step in between I got drunk one day and ran for Congress and outreach director. Really?
No. I mean, it kind of went like this, rednecky Democrats. I had a long history with the Democratic Party, and we can kind of talk about my death in the faith of that after 2020. But I ran for office, and you don't get a lot of people who kind of have rural roots who are deeply involved in the Democratic Party. Mm-hmm. As a unique commodity to begin with, I performed well when I ran for office. And, coming off of a really good, run in this congressional race, the 2020 race to go against Trump was shaping up. And I was like, I'm going to jump into this. And the services of a rednecky Democrat came in handy on that campaign. So, you reach out and say, if you need somebody to drop into a bar that is scary as fuck where they only serve Busch Light and see if anybody in there's got socialism, I'm a willing soldier on this front line.
Wow. Yeah, you're braver than most, for sure.
The mullet helps, though. It
really does.
It disarms them. You see the mullet in the 70s porn stash, and it's definitely like, he's one of us. He's people.
You would be surprised how far it goes.
It really
you probably
does.
aren't surprised. I mean,
I am not.
You both got the same thing going. So, and that took us up to here. I mean, after 2020, and I'm going to shut up after this because it's the longest introduction ever.
No, this is what we wanted. Like I said, I want to
know. I'd always known what labor unions were up to. There's obviously a close association between the Democratic Party, but it wasn't until after we had 20 candidates line up to replace Donald Trump and that we selected Joe Biden,
right,
that I really thought short-term electoral politics is limited at best without organized working class power dragging it to the left to really force the Democratic Party to live up to its working class roots.
Right. So, Bernie can only do so much, right?
Yeah. So big, kind of passively paying attention to labor unions before 2020. After that, it's really the only thing that gives me hope. And, we can see these wins piling up, and I really like it. So that's up to today.
Yeah.
No, that's awesome. So have you had any direct involvement in labor unions then?
It's all been labor hype man, kind of. And, after all that stuff I just mentioned, I moved back to the Ohio Valley. So I bought the house I'm in right now. There's nothing on the walls. because I moved in to rent it and ended up buying it. It's in Wheeling, West Virginia. And, I plunked down roots here to kind of take the political messaging that I've been used to for a long time and do my best to use that to show everybody why you should give a shit about labor unions and what they can do for you.
And your significant other is kind of engaged in this stuff as well, correct? Is she there, like, in West Virginia with you
Absolutely.
now, doing the labor hype man stuff? Why
do you think you moved there?
Jessica Roy and I, we met. Here's a good story for you. We met on TikTok.
Oh, no shit.
Yeah. The algorithm does funny things. You put in,
Sure does.
You put the likes with likes, and very nice things happen. So we're kind of we're a dynamic duo here, sitting and wheeling and giving shit to the man as much as possible.
No, that's awesome. That is so cool. Yeah. All right. So you've been doing this, and I think we've covered union stuff because, again, neither of us are in unions. I'm guessing you've never been in a union then either.
Weirdly, I have. The Warren campaign was unionized. And,
interesting.
That's the only time. Yep.
But I think it's important for people who aren't in unions to recognize the value of unions, because there is a lot of good that comes for us, even though we've never been in a union. A lot of the things that we enjoy today that are a direct result of what unions do. And even if, for whatever reason, whatever industries we're in, it doesn't make sense or we don't have the opportunity to unionize, we still need to be supporting unions. And we've had, some pretty big wins with that this year. But I also wanted to talk to you a little bit about some of the other stuff you're doing with, like, More Perfect Union, right?
Yeah.
And you've been kind of doing the grassroots work on the ground, boots on the ground effort of unifying people that me included, I'm guilty of this, making fun of the people that we look at and we're like, God, you're fucking stupid, right? Like, you just. Like, I feel my IQ points draining away as you talk, and it's a popular it's a popular thing on the left side of social media, and even the Daily Show, where they'll go to these Trump rallies and they will talk to
Jordan Klepper, right?
Yeah, Jordan Klepper, exactly.
I won a cage match with Klepper, by the way. Let the record show.
Wait, you say you won a cage match?
Yeah, exactly.
Like bonesaw cage match.
Yeah. Two dorky white dudes who go to Trump rallies duke it out over the right way to talk.
I really liked your Trump rally video. By the way, I don't know who else Jordan is friends with. It's really just me. But I had also saw that video and was, like, super excited once I made the connection between what sort of content you were making and what your name was, and so I'm really excited you're here. But so I guess we're always trying to bring in a bigger coalition, a bigger people who are interested in progressing a lot of the 8 to 9 to 5 type job, better wages, and just workplace safety. Basically, all the things that unions are for are really, they're people centric, right? They're human centric, and it seems like you've been able to create a space for rural people as well as urban people to kind of coalesce and just kind of form a group. Like, how do you do that? What is that like?
Dude, this happened because I was working in a dive bar. And so 2020 happened. We picked Joe Biden, and I was like, "Oh fuck, all right, we're just gonna mash the gas all the way into hell." Yeah. I guess I'll move back home, work at this dive bar, and just start a newsletter and a TikTok, talking shit basically.
As all success stories start, right?
Yeah. So I was living in this apartment above a really divey bar in a county that voted for Trump by 71%.
Wow.
And,
so it's close, you were telling me.
No, yeah. Just a hair. And, I wear my politics on my sleeve, and I did that in the bar. And, I grew up with these people, and for the most part, we think this divide is so big, and I don't want to minimize it too much. I mean, obviously, there's a reason why you can go to a Trump rally and almost lose your mind at how things are, how things go there and what people think. But just working in this bar, I would say things that if a Democratic candidate said them, they would be called a socialist. I want workers to control the company. I want workers to hire and fire the boss. I want there to be, shared revenue and strong labor unions, all this stuff. And it goes over effortlessly at this dive bar, right? I literally had a guy show me his collection of assault rifle shaped liquor bottles, and like, these are the kind of people I'm talking to, right? So I just kind of had a sense from that, a couple of things here. Like, if you want a working class revolution, if you want all of these left priorities, even when they're watered down and kind of liberal, you're never going to get that by automatically writing off half of the people with the same problems that you have.
Yeah, sure.
So if you need them in the boat, how do you get them in the boat? That's why I wanted to go up to one of these rallies and show, hey, the right wing knows that inside of these people, there's some crazy shit to work with that they can whip up and that they can get votes for their side. But there's an equal amount of socialist things that live within most of these people that the left just hasn't whipped up or built media infrastructure around or let candidates thrive. To bring that out in people. So that was the theory. I wanted to test it, and I still believe it.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. I mean, I feel like, and I know the videos like that are edited, and I don't know how heavily edited yours was, and how many times you had to dodge punches. But I mean, from the video, as a viewer perspective, it looks like you did set out to prove what you proved it, and I mean, it definitely made me do some introspection, because in theory, I think and I believe the same way you do, and then I see people say the dumbest fucking shit I've ever heard in my life, and I'm like, I need to intellectually strangle you until you crawl under a rock and you're never heard from again, and that's always what I go to, and and that's much more gratifying, I feel like, on a knee-jerk emotional level.
Totally.
But you're right. It's like, what are we doing here? And like, obviously, I try to make all my stuff as at least educational as possible. So I'm trying to debunk the things that they're coming up with. But I do it in a very demeaning way a lot of the time, and obviously probably haven't won over a lot of people from the the other side. And so your ability to do that is impressive. And I mean, have you had it? It'll all be anecdotal, but have you had any real success as far as like changing people's votes or bringing them around on policy platforms or anything?
This is a good question, really, because nothing is ever. Everything has gray areas and is kind of on a spectrum. Like on the one hand, is there too much punching down and just kind of going to these rallies to get people to say the craziest shit? Yes. But like we heard crazy shit when we were up there. We heard crazy shit from the same Trump voters who said, I don't like that BlackRock and Vanguard own a bunch of proxy housing and are driving up rents. And they're like, oh yeah, Abraham Lincoln was killed by a coalition of, rich conspiracy theories, right? That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But, and to your point too, I think there should be consequences for saying stupid shit. Like if you say the stupidest shit on earth, I think somebody should probably make fun of you for it. Like there's a place for that too.
Right. Clearly.
Just the main thing is that I think is being left on the table here. And by the way, all those people I talk to, they get that. They can take a punch or a joke, and they certainly have their fun at the expense of liberals.
Oh yeah.
Just the main thing that I think is left on the table is, inequality just keeps getting worse. Most people do not have the luxury of not working. Most people, when you go into work, you don't have we love freedom, right? We love it more than anything. Freedom's the friggin' best. We, shoot off the fireworks and crush the beer and do a backflip off the boat. Like that's
America.
America. That's what this shit is all about, right? But for most of your life, you are clocking in to a dictatorship. You don't have any say in what happens at work, and we just take that for granted, you know? And so there's this whole appeal to people that lands with all kinds of unexpected right-wingers of like, if you love freedom so much, why are you signing over 8 hours every day, you know, of the week, working week, at least, to somebody who shares none of your interests, who is only getting their wealth from the work that you do? You know, when you start in our politics, our candidates don't say that, our media doesn't support it, our, you know, and there's a lot of that sentiment out there, especially when the richest guy on earth can, you know, buy up all these companies and tell everyone to fuck themselves at a press conference and crash the stock price and lose $200 billion and still be the richest man on earth. You know, it's like everybody sees that no matter who you're voting for, but nobody's really speaking to it in a way that you could actually do something about it. And for me, that's what labor unions are. And by the way, I'll end it on this. There's a reason why, you know, candidates and media, of course, you point this out a lot too. There's a reason why people aren't saying that, and that's because the two sides of the working class getting together is terrifying to the people in power, because if it ever happens, the super rich, you know, who are running the country and the whole world into the ground, by the way, have a far way to fall.
Absolutely. No, that's true. So, on the same token, you know, it's obviously rural versus urban. A lot of these divides, blue collar versus white collar, but also like secular versus religious. And I mean, I went to college in the South, in the middle of the Bible Belt, and I'm assuming it's pretty heavy where you are too. That kind of. And that obviously adds a new obstacle into the whole right versus left thing. And have you had any luck navigating that at all?
Oh, I mean, I think this is a broad question, but I think just personally, there's a ton of room for, you know, spiritual. There's room for Jesus on the left. All right, let's not forget this is a brown dude hanging out with the hookers and the lepers and the harlots and all the rest, right? You know, saying "Render unto Caesar," right? You know, I think there's room for spirituality. I think there's room for religion, but you know, we're just so far through the looking glass of holy rollers and prosperity preachers and those that would use the better, more humbler teachings of religion to their own benefit, that it gets branded that way. But that's not the whole picture, and I feel like a lot of rural people kind of know that and try to live their lives in a way that's not anything at all like the people who run Liberty University.
Right.
And you know, I even think it's really interesting. There's a lot of history to this that was, you know, an American favorite is crushing the left and the commies, right? We do it well, and we do it often. Before World War I, there was a pretty large socialist movement in West Virginia.
Yeah.
And that wasn't tied to Russia or theory or any of this other crap. It was pretty homegrown. This has always been a state that has been run by the richest extractive industry that there is. And the opposition to that was, you know, not only had room for spirituality, but was multiracial and working class. You know, black, white, all kinds of, you know, European ethnicities came together in places like Matewan to, you know, before World War I, call out the worst abuses of coal in this state and had real wins. I mean, when Eugene Debs ran for president, there was no
most successful third-party candidate to ever run for president.
Right, and the heart of his success, when you look at it per capita and all that, was here in West Virginia. Because
I mean, I believe it. Obviously, the coal wars and everything like that. That was huge labor movement before, you know, before there was labor movements, and I've done content on this too because I think it's a fascinating and incredibly important and overlooked part of our history.
Right, the originators of the redneck
Yeah.
name.
Yeah. Talk on that a little bit. We love that.
Yeah, well, I've done the Redneck Army. I've done a whole video on that one. One of my that was actually I think my first video to break 1 million views.
Yeah.
Was it was the Redneck Army video, and again going back to blue collar and rural people who think like us. There's more of us, I think, than people think there is when they don't live in these areas, or even when they do live in these areas. Just because the right is so loud.
Oh, yeah.
They're very, very loud, and it gets very easy to get drowned out, and it can be scary. I mean, if you aren't, as dumb as we are to just go flaunt our political ideologies in dive bars in rural places, it can be scary. These people use intimidation to try to extend their ideologies. And so it gets really lonely, I think, for people who look like us, who talk like us, who have our kinds of upbringings, and think the way that we do, but don't have the ability to express that, and find it really difficult to find that camaraderie, to find that community of people who are like, yeah, I believe in things should be maybe a little bit more to the left, and I don't believe in, giving the richest people in the world more tax breaks. Well, I can't, afford basic health insurance, and you can't afford to live. So
there it is.
I think that the work that you're doing with that kind of stuff is incredibly important too, because it's giving that beacon of, hey, I'm not alone out here.
Yeah.
And I know I get those kind of comments on my content all the time. People reaching out to me and saying that it's really lonely being a leftist in rural red fill in the blank town or county.
Yeah.
And you give me hope that I'm not alone, and that I'm not the one in the wrong. I'm not an anomaly. And I think that you're doing more work, because you're doing that. I'm just doing it on a screen, and you're doing it face to face with people and stuff like that. That's really cool.
I mean, I think there's a lot of stuff to say here, but man, the pandemic happened, we all went inside, and then bam, there's a new social media platform where more people are going to it than Google, and all of a sudden you see left opinions. You can have one person with a TikTok account that's getting 20 million views a year on the low end. Representing left opinions, and there's 10,000 of those people out there, and we've had that ever since it came online, and that just inspired more short video to get out there. So I do really feel like everybody has something to bring to this, whatever your strong suit is, and a ton of people have. And I think not a lot of stuff gives me hope, really. I mean, the labor movement is one, but I think the explosion of this is populist media, right? Like, I was running a stump grinder for 7 years and farming organically, for 7 years. I was running a stump grinder to pay for the farming habit. And, you can pick up a phone and talk into it and speak to the fact that no matter how hard you work, it's getting harder to live. And so many people have done that. It's populist media, and that's another thing that gives me hope. Second thing I want to talk about is, I feel comfortable taking a shit on the direction of the Democrats because I have been them for so long. Yep. Ran as a Democrat twice, worked on a major campaign twice. I have been there when people say, I don't want to vote for this party anymore. And I say, here's the reasons why you should. But man, if it's ever time for them to really get the news and change direction, it should be right now. Because when you were talking about people really feeling alone out there, part of why they feel alone is because the Democrats are not running in areas that used to be their base. And the perfect example is right where I'm sitting. I mean, right across the river in Ohio, it follows the river, with West Virginia on one side and all the way down to Kentucky. We have a congressional district that has gone through the furthest shift to the right in the shortest amount of time out of any congressional district. And it used to be fundamental. You couldn't win as a Democrat in Ohio without winning the river district. And that's coal, steel, industry, small rural towns. That used to be our base. And then we just we threw in with defending suburban, educated, affluent people. We, rely on more donations from Wall Street, and we look at these working class bases and say, we're not even going to run for him anymore. And it leaves a lot of people standing out there saying, dang, I might be the only one left around here keeping the lights on. But I'll close on this point is, Trump kind of had a similar thing. There are all kind of people who are out there with shitty opinions waiting for their hero to come back and show that they're not alone. Right? So I think that politics can really change when you have someone with the courage to kind of go against the grain and stand up and say, this is who we are, this is who we're going to fight for. And, a situation that seems completely hopeless can kind of change when the right candidate and the right party gets the priorities to run on. And I'm hoping there's a return to, labor, left, populist party. I think there's a lot of support for that.
Yeah, I mean, isn't that kind of like the Democratic lack of messaging to these type of people is like it's the reactionary reaction, right has like the reactionary thing. That's the worst thing that's ever going to happen to America, and you're destroying everything. That's like their version of reactionary politics. But the left's and the Democratic reactionary thing to do is just say, "Oh, you're racist. You're not worth the time. You're uneducated, and you'll never vote for us. So we're never going to talk to you." Like that feels like the Democratic reactionary version that we see so much.
I think it's a little bit of that. I think too that the Democratic reactionary thing is they wait till the right actually destroys fundamental parts of our country, and then they react to it.
Sure, yeah, that's a good part.
But also to John's point and everything too is the Democratic Party. We had a real shift in blue because blue collar and farmers all used to be vote blue. I mean that was the farthest left you could get, at least when it came to labor and that kind of stuff. Rural was always blue, and that kind of changed under Nixon, and that's a whole another story that we could spend an entire hour on. But the Democrats realized that if you focus on the highest concentrations of people in the big cities and stuff, you can win elections with a lot less work. I think a lot less campaigning, a lot less. I mean, it takes a lot more time and resources to knock on doors that aren't all in the same building than it does, and so that they just started focusing on cities, and we can afford to lose. And it's sad to say, but yeah, they wrote us off. They wrote off rural communities, and the Republicans saw their opportunity to pick up the slack, and that's what they did.
So it's somewhat of a strategy in and of itself, but also this reactionary lefties being like, oh, well, that idea is absolutely bonkers insane. You're unreachable, when it's actually, if you engage some of these people in matters that are closer to home that actually affect them, maybe we wouldn't be losing
basket of deplorables. Is that what you're getting at?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
I mean, let's also take a little hit off of the dream pipe here too, which is that I don't think you would have to knock on a single rural door to get people to show out if you won an election and then you put handcuffs and frog marched the CEO of the Sackler Enterprise into jail where they belong. I mean,
absolutely true.
In Kermit, West Virginia, it's a town of a couple hundred people. They pumped hundreds of thousands, more than 1 million pills into this town of 400 people. They knew their product was addictive. They marketed it. They pushed it. It kills more people than Vietnam every year. And these people are just allowed to walk around and do business. What party is going to stand up to corporate crime like that? I mean, you have an entire A-lister Hollywood movie made about Parkersburg, West Virginia, and the DuPont plant. Literally, everybody on this podcast and listening to it right now has a chemical in their blood. 99.7% of people on Earth have a chemical in their blood that was invented by 3M, manufactured by DuPont, and dumped into the Ohio River and all over the world. And it causes cancer. The movie's Dark Waters, and this company, DuPont, making money hand over fist, buying our politicians. You can get locked up in certain places, although it's changing now, for having a joint in your pocket. This is all kind of to say that, if your priorities, there's not really a party for the working class. I mean, that's kind of obvious.
True. The Democrats have shifted from the party of the working class to the party of the corporations, which
Exactly.
obviously we've seen from both parties, but certainly, you can see it very visibly in the Democratic side.
Yeah, there's a party for people with private jets, and there's a party for people, with 3-car garages. And everybody else is kind of on their own. But I think if priorities changed, you wouldn't have trouble getting votes.
No, I mean, I think Bernie Sanders' campaign speaks volumes to that.
Yeah.
Grassroots, no corporate money, and the amount of involvement, especially from young people who are generally disengaged from politics, by and large, being that engaged. That was the very first only campaign I've ever personally donated money to.
Yeah.
That's the campaign that really got me the politic bug, honestly.
Yeah. Interesting.
So no, I think that's great, but. It's not all doom and gloom. You're saying there are some things that give you hope, right? And a lot of that has come from Labor Party wins, from union wins this year. I know the UAW one was a huge one that you were wanting to talk about, and I just want to hear you talk about it.
Yeah, man. Thanks. I'm in politics and I'm a white guy. I mean, I got a big mouth and I'll go on forever. So you got to kind of pump the brakes on me. But why does this matter to anybody listening? You have a guy, the leader of the UAW right now. It's worth mentioning. I covered the UAW in 2021. They had different leadership back then. And the leadership in 2021 is facing criminal charges of the UAW. They were embezzling members' money, spending $13,000 in a day on a box of cigars. And there was this reform movement by workers, by members of the union, to elect new leadership, and they did. The guy who's leading it now is Shawn Fain. This guy has no college degree, none at all. He's been an auto worker for 26 years, and they just went on strike. You may have seen that news against the big 3 automakers. They did it in a unique way. And this union, which only a couple years ago had its own problems, overcame those problems, installed a guy who was just a working guy, 26 years on an assembly line, no college degrees. That guy went up against the biggest financial powers, the most elite corporations in the world, CEOs that were making double-digit millions of dollars every year, the kind of people who own not only Congress but presidents, and he whipped their ass.
Yeah,
it was beautiful.
It was beautiful. And just ask yourself, what other thing is putting wages, retirement, healthcare, safety, delivering on every single working class issue immediately, not with an election, not by donating to somebody, politician who may or may not deliver, not by relying on the right people to win in the right numbers and then waiting 10 years for a bad healthcare law to get passed. This happened right now because working class people stood together, organized, withheld their labor, and they won against the biggest corporation possible. If that is possible, then it can happen anywhere. And and that's a big point to make here. Because the UAW, I mean, we're in a new era of union leadership. We hit rock bottom. The numbers were pretty low, and we're still there, but we're seeing new wins happen and new leadership and new strategy for the future right now, and that's why it's so important. So on the heels of this big win, the UAW is now organizing. They didn't just call it there. They got huge deliveries for their members. They're on a drive where other unions have failed in the past against the southern non-unionized car makers, VW, Toyota, Mercedes, all of these manufacturers who ran to the south for favorable business laws. Those are now being organized by the UAW. So we're going to see the same thing, the same kind of fight that they had in Detroit is now going to be across the industry, Tesla included.
he mentioned like in 2028 when the next contract is up, he said instead of just the big three, it's going to be the big 4, 5, or 6 that are going to be part of these conversations. So like they're pushing for some major gains and just people join the union and just get up. And not to say that those workers haven't gained a lot already. Honda, Hyundai, Toyota, they've all been pushing huge wage increases and lowering the time it takes to get to that top pay rate. Like they're trying to hedge their bets right now to not allow Sean Fain to get more power. But I don't know. I don't think it's going to work. I don't think they're going to be able to do enough. Hopefully,
and I think this goes beyond Sean Fain too, because Sean Fain is an example, right? And I mean, and it's these big wins. They need somebody to achieve those things, but then it's an idea. It's something that can't, move forward. And like how Elon Musk really revolutionized the automotive industry by making Tesla get financed and all that kind of shit. Now, he's obviously losing all of his nuts and bolts, and whatever happens with Tesla, the market has changed as a result of that. And the same thing happens with these types of ideologies. You're getting people that say, "Oh, this works. I've seen this work," because it only takes one big win, just like it took one big loss. With the Air Traffic Controllers Union under Reagan, went from 300 plus strikes a year to 30 after he broke that, and that really was what killed that was the death blow to the unions and got a lot of that anti-union sentiment amongst blue collar people who should be the most pro-union people in the world. And we haven't seen those wins. We haven't seen any good union wins. It's like, fuck yeah, you guys took it to the people that we all fucking hate and wiped their nose in their own piss and made them clean it up a little bit. And it's a big cheer. And and it wasn't just UAW. It's also been Teamsters. It's been SAG. Can you say like Starbucks is unionizing now too? So like it's all of that. So Sean Fain, I think, will still be a leadership figure in this, hopefully for some time to come. I think he's got a lot more good work he can do. But even without him, even if they manage to kind of undermine and cripple his personal political strength and movement, I think the idea's out of the bag, the cat's out of the bag, the ideology and the hope is there that we can maybe take this into our own hands and not just play with whatever shitty hand they decide to deal us. And so I'm super excited for that.
Hopefully if he somehow, whatever happens, hopefully nothing bad, but hopefully we can take the message of this whole year and say, like, unionization does work. It can be very successful, even if for whatever reason the humans at the top are less than kosher. I don't know.
Yeah,
exactly.
And one of the things that's so good about it is it's so accessible. I mean, a union is two people who work together, who join together. I mean, there's endless resources out there. If you're listening, I can forward a couple over. But Google it, how to unionize. I mean, there's a variety of guides to kind of educate yourself on this. Ranging from the pretty boring and pretty, your eyes will glaze over at the traditional unions, the stuff that they have to write out there, but all the way up to there's a guide. Young woman in her 20s worked at a non-traditional place you wouldn't think would be unionized. She didn't know anything about it. She went from that to successfully unionizing her workplace, put together an 80-page PDF that's, riddled with cuss words and all kinds of stuff. But it shows you exactly how to do it. And the point is, you can do it right now. I mean, look at the case of the Amazon labor union. You have to take a grain of salt with everything because winning a union is just the first step. I mean, there's a reason why companies pay millions of dollars to an entire industry whose only purpose...
Hundreds of millions,
whose only purpose is to make sure you don't unionize. It's because this, more than anything else, is a direct lever of power over corporations. They don't want you to unionize, and they're going to spend money against it. But, you have I met the people, I covered the Amazon labor union, and these were folks who didn't know the first thing about unions. They didn't affiliate with a traditional one. They started bringing weed and pizza to the friggin' bus stop outside of a warehouse.
Know your people, right?
Know your people. And they won a union at Amazon. That did happen. They don't have a contract, but JFK 8, one warehouse for Amazon in Staten Island, it was unionized. And you talk about pigs flying and hell freezing over, those things will happen before Amazon gets a union, and they already have one, right? So it is possible to anybody listening.
Right, and we've had some. I was not really as successful, but like down in Shakopee, Minnesota, there's a larger warehouse, and they had some union talks, and there was I think like a union vote. I don't think it went through all that well, or as well as it did in Staten Island, but it can't be anywhere.
And the fact is, people are trying, and not everyone's going to be successful, but they're working on it. And again, giving credit where it's due. Biden has had kind of a mixed history on union stuff, but he has made it easier to start a union. Companies cannot sabotage your efforts now, and if they try to sabotage your efforts to start a union, then you're just automatically a union. You don't have to even go through the process anymore. So that's awesome. There's never been a better time to start a union, and it's getting easier and easier all the time. With all the publicity that we're getting, with some new laws and regulations on that, I think the writing's on the wall that hopefully we're seeing another kind of rise of the labor movement that we saw kind of around the turn of the century, with obviously in West Virginia and the Coal Wars and all the union stuff that really led to the rise. This is again back to Make America Great Again. When was America great? It's when everybody was in a fucking union, right? Like that's when everybody could afford the house and the car and the stay-at-home wife you could come home drunk to and beat. Like that was the time. And
get rid of that part.
But yeah, so I'm super excited about it, and it's awesome to see somebody like you who's putting in the effort, even though you're not a part of a union, even though this, again, it doesn't directly affect you, but it indirectly affects every single one of us. And everything we have in way of workers' rights, from safety regulations to pay to weekends off to holidays, whether you to overtime, whether you work for a union company or not, it's unions that got that for you. It's unions that allow you to have that. And now, I mean, it's still worse than most of the world, but it's better than it could be.
Yeah. And another thing to say here, unions are not this like third party organization or something. They're just you. They're the people in them. When you say unions got us the weekend, it was working people in unions that got us the weekend. It was you with other people. The beauty of it is it's just strength in numbers. One side has all the money, we got the people, and a union is just a group of people who are withholding their labor until certain demands are met. And I think it's just so the right wing just forever has kind of taken this image for themselves of like, oh, hey, if you like monster trucks and pro wrestling and ripping it on a jet ski and, shooting guns off in the air or whatever, and freedom, like, you're in our party. But the freedom to do whatever you want is never going to be secured by people who are delivering for your boss. That's the long and short of it. If you want to do all those things, the only way you're going to get it is by joining together with other workers and forcing people to give you that dignity. So it's good to see, after so many years of losses, that finally coming back around again.
Yeah, and we talk, almost every episode is basically a failure of democracy in some shape or another. And this, and on a couple episodes we talked about ballot measures and how like that's like a form of direct democracy that we have today. That's a tool for some states to make some really big changes. Ohio is one of them that's seen some really successful ballot measures that directly impact people's lives. But unions are essentially like the ballot measure of the workplace. Like this is our way for direct democracy in a way that doesn't rely on politicians to do anything. It doesn't rely, other than for them to not, break a strike. which happens clearly. But for the most part, they're not going to be able to do that, and this is our opportunity to take back, some of that, power that we've lost in our, wages and freedoms and all that stuff. But
let's talk about
that's the hope.
Yeah, exactly. And this is a great point about Ohio. I am a big fan of the jazz cabbage, as they say. I do like to partake. And happy, December 7th is the day that Issue 2 goes into effect in Ohio, where, the voters overwhelmingly passed home grow and recreational use of weed. Now, talking about ballot initiatives and power, right after that passed, the Ohio State Legislature, which is horribly gerrymandered and has super majorities of Republicans.
One of the worst in the country.
One of the worst in the country. I mean, man, it goes deep. But take issue 2, weed in Ohio. They are passing, I think it's HB 86 right now, to curtail. They're not going to completely overturn it, but they are doing away with. They're going to try and do it, and there's nothing to stand in their way. Try to do away with home grow and reduce a lot of the things that an overwhelming majority of voters voted for. And this speaks to power. It's all power. The reason they can do that in Ohio is because they pick the voters to get their seats. They don't face a challenge on power. They have a super majority. But what, this labor movement is about is power. That's what it all comes down to. The reason why they can ignore the voters in Ohio is because they figured out how to organize power without majorities of people on their side. They had to cheat to do it. But the better thing is that anybody has to go to work in the morning and fundamentally shares class issues, has the same power, and all they got to do is unite and organize.
Right.
Oh, and I actually had this one of the notes on one of the things we were gonna to leave it on. Is it's not right versus left.
Yeah.
It's rich versus the rest of us peasant fucks, right? Like that's all it is. It's rich versus poor. It's not white versus black. It's not left versus right. Everything is class warfare, and all of those divides that we have within that class warfare is just psychological class warfare from our opponents, and that the wealthy trying to find ways to keep us at each other's throats, so we're not at their throats, so we're not doing things like unionizing, organizing, passing ballot initiatives for things that they don't want. Didn't one of them fuckers in Ohio say something about this is why why direct democracy isn't good or something like that after these ballot initiatives passed?
For sure. I mean, if you scratch the surface of Ohio, good Lord, we got the. What is it? The worst and darkest, not the best and brightest.
Right. Well, back to that, like rich versus the rest of us. And I have this conversation whenever I have my parents come to town, it always comes up back to politics a little bit. They're very much Fox News watchers and Republican voters. And I try to have these conversations where I'm trying to be diplomatic and not, go too crazy on the left theory side of things. But eventually it usually comes down to as me being like, well, I know that you're upset about people saying like CRT is like teaching our kids to hate themselves, but like it's really like what it comes down to is that, throw away, disregarding the aspects of race, it's about a poorer person being disenfranchised by a richer person. And they're always like, yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. It shouldn't be about black versus white. It should be about poor versus rich. And I'm like, yeah, it should be. But that's not what's on Fox News. That's not what's being put out there. And I think that's kind of the message that Democrats, and specifically Bernie Sanders, obviously he had a lot of success, but that's like his message. And it's not a message that the Democratic Party as a whole is willing to latch onto, it feels like.
Yeah, I mean, obviously they're not. When we lost to Donald Trump with Hillary Clinton because they shoved her down our throat, and then we come around and they're like, you know what we should do? The exact same thing again. Like, how about Joe Biden this time?
Yeah, sure. Get the old grandpa out there.
What's the oldest thing we've got in the barrel here? Let's give that a shot.
This is a really good point too. We talked a little bit about what that there's history that doesn't make it into history books or isn't taught in our schools. And one of the things you just made me think of is the farm equipment workers union back in the 40s in Kentucky. This is the 40s. 20 years before Martin Luther King led the March on Washington. Black-led unions in the South, the FE union, black and white workers had marches all over Kentucky where this union was in farm equipment, international harvester factories. And they were leading multiracial working class coalitions to integrate towns in the South 20 years before Dr. King marched on Washington, which is why this class race divide comes up a lot. But my own personal belief is the best way to achieve equality and build power around race and gender and everything else the right tries to divide us with is to have class unity of a lot of diverse people with the realization that you'll never win on a class-based agenda if you don't first get past whatever your hang-ups are dividing you from other working class people. When you need somebody different than you to stand with you to secure your economic rights, it gets a lot easier to understand where people who are different than you are coming from. So I think there's a place for that. You don't have to throw out race and gender. That's part of what makes class unity strong, is to get people to realize that I need you as much as you need me, and we're going to see each other with respect, and we're going to unite against the common denominators that we have. I think that's possible.
Right. And obviously there's a place for identity politics. Starting there is an understandable spot where you're like, well, you're the person next to me. You look like me. We talk together. We're from the same group, the same people, have similar history. Like, it's understandable to want to start from that.
Yeah.
And as leftists, we have to look at like where we are and what our shared goals are, and start with our circle here and then just make it a little bit bigger and be like, hey, you also have this issue, right? It doesn't matter what you look like, but we're all facing these same issues. And I think that's the failure of leftist, propaganda, is that we don't, and it's been said a ton of times, is that like, well, there's a reason why black people don't really go Democrat anymore, or like they don't like see like the leftist like ideas and theory actually applying to them. They only see like white people trying to make things better for themselves. And it's because we just don't bring that conversation up to the wider group. We don't discuss it on the fundamental levels that affects everybody, right?
Working class revolution is everybody who works.
Right.
Absolutely. Yeah, and to your point on leftists, I mean, that is a problem that the left has, is we will eat our own over the dumbest possible shit. All like we are our own worst enemies, and I mean, like, I'm sure you too, on when you have a platform and you go in the comments and there's always somebody who needs to be the leftist who wants to pick on something you didn't say quite right, or like I don't know. I made a comment once about the scene in Congress when Kevin McCarthy was getting fired, about him basically being in a gimp suit, and it was a dominatrix reference,
nice.
and it was funny as fuck, right? And one person like got all offended about like kink shaming or something like that, and it's like you gotta find your line. There's certain things that people need to learn to let go, because that's class differentiation there. It's like you don't want to fight your allies before you even start trying to recruit more allies. If I'm already on your side, don't pick a fight with the people that are already on your side.
And I get the temptation to just be like, oh, well, way to only diagnose the symptom, and way to not discuss the way that capitalism as our structure is like the actual problem. And it's like, I get like that's we always go back to that when we always like feel like, yeah, like clearly there's a fundamental issue, but we're trying to be a little bit more, I don't know, realistic in that there are incremental things that we can do that doesn't require a revolution that will be bloody. Like
that's where I kind of end up, man. I mean, forever. It's like I said, I was in Democratic Party politics for a good 10 years. As a volunteer, as a candidate, as a staffer on a presidential campaign. Now's the time to get creative. Get a little wild with your politics if you want to, all right? Because all indicators are that, we are smashing the gas straight off of a cliff here on a couple different issues. So it's time to, make common cause with people who have class interest and damn the torpedoes.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think
right. As much as we love the guillotine idea, theoretically,
I mean,
I just feel like I personally don't want to be the guy pulling the
Viva
rope.
la revolution.
Maybe we put that one in the parking lot. As I say, we put a pin in it.
I don't want to be part of the party that has like a hanging noose in front of Congress. That's I feel like it
would
look good when we saw
the noose. The noose has some bad connotations, but just the human cigar cutter is, that's a little bit more class solidarity type execution. And I'm not saying we need to use it, but if we just start leaving them on the National Mall, perhaps they'll start getting the message.
I feel like I'll gladly take all of Elon Musk's wealth. That'd be where I feel real comfortable.
No, I think the union way is perhaps maybe a little bit more sane. And,
I do agree, and I think I hadn't had much faith in unions until this year, just because I always believed in unions. I hadn't had faith that we were going to get back to union power because they've spent so many years undermining them with right to work laws.
The propaganda is crazy against unions.
Oh.
It's absolutely bonkers.
But I think we've reached a tipping point. I've had a lot more faith and optimism in how this is gonna come out, and I do think I'm even more of the mindset now that unions are probably the biggest lever we have to push through the policy and the change we want to see, at least on certain issues, even more than the reform and the political stuff that we talk about on a regular basis. Because you're absolutely right. You don't need to vote somebody in and hope they do what they say and get 300 other people in a room to agree, and then 51 other people in the next room to agree, and so on and so forth. So it's awesome. I'm super excited to see where this is going, and I don't know. I'm happy that you could come on and talk to us a little bit. What else? Any shameless self promotion you want to do before we completely wrap this up?
All the time.
Any plugs?
Well, maybe some shout outs and then some plugs. Thanks to you guys, obviously, for having me on. Love that.
Thank you for joining us.
Absolutely. The high-vis solidarity is great. Thanks to the listeners. Thanks to the FBI agent who is monitoring and has us all on a list now, and maybe the ones about to parachute through my windows and willing.
Hopefully we were entertaining for them.
There's a van outside your house. And the shameless self-promotion, I write a newsletter called The Holler. You can find it. That's on Substack, and you can find it at theholler.co. I was too poor for .com, so I got theholler.co.
Save some money on that extra letter.
Yeah, exactly. The M's are, inflation really hit M's. And then you can find the socials at Hey John Russell everywhere, and we do a lot of really good work with More Perfect Union. They're worth tuning into, and of course, share this podcast everywhere because y'all rock as well.
All right, awesome. Well, we appreciate you. Yeah, the More Perfect Union stuff has been great. He had been following that long time before all of this stuff came together. And I've obviously been following you for quite a while on TikTok and everything like that. And I love all the stuff you put out. Talking to a racist uncle at Thanksgiving was one of my favorites.
Hey, man, I aspire. Great job on the channel. I aspire to your level one day. You're up there, man. Voice of the people.
Well, I mean, I try, but no, your stuff, Jessica's stuff. I don't know. She doesn't seem like she posts as much anymore, but I used to love watching all her stuff too.
Oh yeah, she's good. She's good.
honestly, I started following her for the singing on it. I went to school down in the South, like I told you,
Mm-hmm.
in Bristol, and it that's the thing I miss most about the culture down there is the music. And so every time somebody like her comes across my screen, it's like instant follow, and it's like, oh, and you do the political shit too. All right, awesome, we are on the same page.
100%. Give Jessica Roy a follow out there if you want some of the same
absolutely.
stuff plus singing like an absolute bird.
Yeah, amazing voice, and that's ROI, Jessica ROI, right?
Yep.
And all right. Well, thank you so much again for coming on and wasting over an hour of your time bullshitting with
Hell
us. We appreciate it. I appreciate you, rocking the high vis with me today too. For everybody who can't see, it's a good color. You should try it on. And yeah, we appreciate having you. Thanks for coming. Thank you all.
Pleasure.
No, thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next week.
Yep. See ya.